Okay. I know exactly. Open ASMR. Like slow crunch. And or wanting to kill someone. That's so the last exercise that I want to do with you, and I think Professor Mukherjee is going to carry that on tomorrow, right? Like is using the utopia pieces. Like I think accidental feminism does imagination in a certain way, and it's like trying to think of who can imagine on whose behalf, who gets to have a voice, whose voice should matter, etc. And the book itself, forget about the empirics of the book. Like really, the argument that I'm hoping you get to is like who can we speak on behalf of? How do movements matter? How do movements count? What are the limits of movements? And I don't know if you read the footnotes that are with the thing, but I really think the footnotes do a lot of the work of my thinking while writing that. I wrote that after I'd written um, a book that was so empirical and so law focused that I had the same rethought. I was like, wait, is this the book I want to put out in the world? I actually want to think about these movements more broadly. And so that's the background for that piece. And I think imagination and accidents are really helpful tools to think about utopia, right? So I want to give you all about 15 minutes, work in pairs or work in threes, it doesn't matter, but I want you to work together to think about active synergies. So not just experiences, not just like examples, but active synergies theoretically. Like you've been doing this work already, so you know how to do this. But think about the synergies between this idea of imagination and accident, right, on the one hand, with this concept of, like in Bendit, there is a concept of like utopic imagining, right, for something that's not there, right? And I want you to connect that to utopia, like cruising utopia. What is it? How does it help you cruise utopia in a sense? Is the prompt, right? Do with it what you will, but I want it to be rooted in the three readings. So when we come back in 15 minutes, like take time to read. Don't just reflect on it at the broadest level. Think about how the concepts in the three readings help you start the conversation for utopia, because this is how we're ending the class, right? We've done structure and performance in the first class, then we went in intersectionality, then we've done identity, and we've started to get into the trickiness of thinking of identity as a helpful concept and the limits of identity. Now we're in the next page, which is like, fine, now we've like already, when we've started to put this on the table, what do you think about utopia that is possible? Like what can be a utopic reading? How would a utopic reading be or exist? And so that's the prompt. So take 15 minutes, work in pairs, and come up with and I want you to think through the Bendit reading, the accidental feminism reading as possible starting points, if not others, to the cruising utopia reading. Okay, 15 minutes. Stay here. Yeah, stay here and think together.
I have a question.
Yeah. Right. In the cruising utopia reading.
No, no. If we're imagining, if we are doing a different imagination, I was just new concept or certain examples.
Can be an example, can be a concept, but I want you to think of how maybe an example has related to the concepts, or help, or some concepts help understand an example better than others. Or Yeah, let's get back. Stay where you are in your groups. I mean, if that's uncomfortable, too bad. But like, yeah. But stay sort of where you are in your group, so we can have like a discussion. We have another half. I keep giving you this timeline. It's not to induce your anxiety. It's for me to remember that I only have this much time. I know I said we'd work on papers today, but I'm going to take the invitation of like the conversation on the generative way in which it's been moving to assume that actually it'd be better use of our time if we discuss these readings. And then tomorrow we'll have time to work on papers and the discussion. And whatever we don't finish up Utopia today, hopefully you've like thought through your thoughts and your examples, and we'll finish up the conversation on Utopia tomorrow. Okay, so which group wants to debrief? Who wants to start? Don't make me call on you. Because then I will 100% call on someone that hasn't spoken yet. So even if you look away. Why don't you tell us? What did you speak about?
I didn't contribute much to the conversation. But,
Why?
I was just listening.
Okay.
And like he narrated a story about Chuktai.
I just gave the example of Lihaf by Ismat Chuktai. So when you spoke of Bennett like that, it reminded me of that and how that story is also not, it's not spelling it out for you entirely, the narrative and the relationship that those two women share, right? But it is there for you to unpack.
I'm only pausing because this class is called Guilt after the name of that book, Quilt. So the first version of this class was called Quilt. After that piece, because I was so mesmerized, that was the first note, that was the first connect. So I used to start the class with that note as an example of Bende. So I'm so cool. It's so cool that that's what it reminded you of, because and Gayatri Gopinath has a great piece on that as a way of thinking about queer solidarity in spaces where there isn't language for it. But yeah, this class was called Quilt and Start Queer Understandings of in Law and Legal Theory. Then I changed it to Guilt. And so it's really cool that was so when you said that, I was like, wait, did you know I used to do that? Obviously, you couldn't have known I did that. But yeah, I love that that's the connection. Yeah, exactly. There are places where when you can't talk, and I think the larger question is when you can't talk about something actively in a context, how do you approach it, right? So queerness in sites where it is not legal, literature allows you to access it on terms that could feel different and affectively offer imagination that's slightly different from anything, even if you don't realize it at the time. So you might have read that story and not realize it's a queer story, right? But there isn't a way you could have seen Fire and not known it was a queer story. Right, like because Fire was marketed as a queer story, but there are other. I think there's queerness all around you in a sense if you pay attention to it. Right, you just choose not to think about it. Even like what we think of as peripheral queer sites, right? Like when people say, "Oh, how do you identify as asexual?" For example, like, "Oh, why is it important?" The truth is, there are asexuals. Like there are more asexuals than sexuals in like late society. Some, oftentimes, right? Like if you actually take the population, less people are sexually active at given points in time or identify as being sexually active, but we just don't ask them to identify as sexually active. So like the latent identity categories are always assumed and not imposed. So I'm glad that's the example that came up for you. But what about the other readings? What relationships you said you didn't contribute to the example, but what were the other?
Connected that to Bendit.
Yeah, but what about the Bendit reading made sense, for example?
The fact that you can't really address the problem head on, in a sense. I mean, it's better if you're ambiguous in a way, especially in societies like India. So yeah, that's what.
And I'm really curious. We've been talking about ambiguity a lot in this class. Like, how did that stretch the conversation you've had?
Yeah.
Yeah, both of you. You and then Shivani, you can go after.
Yeah, we were in the same room.
Yeah.
So our main understanding of utopia is like the core of it is let us exist in flux.
Let us exist. Oh, that's a good descriptor to start that discussion with. Utopia as how to be in flux.
Yeah. So it's
let us exist.
Why do we need define? Why do we have to fit into categories? Why
we came up with multiple examples. We related it to the homophobia of law reading. It's just like why, and this point was made again. So it's like why aren't everyone just listed as parents? Why do you have to be mother and father? And then we also brought in more contemporary examples. When on Hinge, your only option of left leaning is liberal. You don't get like more left leaning options on that.
It's a dating website.
Yeah.
You can't just say words like that. Assume that I know what it means.
Dominated yourself.
Yeah, my bad.
What would I know what a local app is called? Yeah, because it doesn't.
Very Hinge is a US app.
We don't have to go into how I do not understand dating apps. Okay.
I met his wife on Hinge.
Who did? I like how the threat to whether I know I'm like a assured resource is whether I. No, he did not meet his wife.
He has literally written about it.
I only knew his wife was a really cool artist. That's all I know about his wife. Hey, Nari, she is an artist, right? His mother.
Mother is
Correct. Yeah. Who's also a cool artist.
Yes.
Why are we talking about this? Go back. So the Hinge left, right swipe. Yes.
No, on Hinge, if you have political stance, you can't really, the leftist thing you have is liberal. You don't have, you
Progressive.
can't really go more left than that. That's all your options are.
Can't you have a definition website? Like, don't they do that like in like a
Text.
Twitter by text?
No, that's what you have to do that. You can't do that or your political thing, but you can do that on like, what you're looking for.
Huh.
So we were just like, why can't you just like let us write more about what politics means? Because a bunch of people, as someone who uses Hinge, a bunch of people are just like, I don't want to identify as liberal on Hinge because that's not what my politics are. But
Yeah.
when that's a leftist option you have, it's just like, okay, I guess I'll go with that because nothing else fits.
Which is also connecting to the Dean Spade reading of what do you do when administrative options are so limiting that you feel like you have to fit inside of them, even if what is available to you is different.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so changes in the law might still offer new possibilities, but they might be non-affirming, right? So I was thinking of the parent thing. The flip side of it is like a trans mother could really want mother on the certificate, right? And there's something about what it means to. We've gone through the entire circle. Identity is helpful, identity is limiting, no identity at all, right? And like that circle is useful to think about law, politics, and society because it's not always the right answer. You have to have like the limitations of it sitting alongside its possibility. Yeah.
Okay, so the one thing when I was reading Reddit, concept that really struck me was ambiguity and specifically how ambiguity makes things more accessible.
Huh.
Because that one thing you wrote about how Fire is like an explicitly queer movie, and a lot of people wouldn't go watch it because
Or they would think you were wrong to watch it at the time that it came out.
And even when you watch it, I guess it'd be hard for those concepts to sit with. But like let's say bend it like that. Like, you said that you can watch it with your grandma who doesn't.
Yeah.
But she could also relate to that.
Yeah.
Because there's so much ambiguity in the queerness that's presented over there. And
Yeah.
I think something, some I don't know how it's connected to law, but I think there's something about ambiguity making things more accessible.
Yeah.
More inclusive.
And I was struggling with how, I think that offers a possibility for queer futurity, right? Ambiguity offers a possibility for queer futurity. And I think that is how I'm committed to that argument, right? Like this idea of like there is possibility in ambiguity precisely because you don't have to identify, right? Precisely because you don't have to say, oh, I'm a left progressive that watches Fire because I am queer friendly, right? Like the fact that you don't have language, this also connects back to our conversation on language, how like when you don't have language for it, there can be rights that are not rights. You move beyond the rights discourse, right? You happen to be able to access just being, which can be immensely psychically helpful, right? To not have to constantly define in a way that definition doesn't quite allow. And I think the way it connects to law is that law always asks for definition.
Yes. And I was thinking about how, when there's ambiguity, when there's no categorization, when there's power involved over there. And, the people in power, I don't know how to say this. I think I was thinking about your example again when you said that, when you tell people that you can use any pronouns, and the pronouns they go to are like the heteronormative.
Or what they clearly think of as my gender presentation based on,
So that was again like this tension I was thinking of, when you have ambiguity again, what do people choose to do?
Yeah.
When there's power involved.
And then power always involved in it.
Yeah. Yes.
Right, which goes back to the parent discussion, like this conversation that you're having, like if you have parent one, parent two, and they look at you and they think the thing that you are is mother, then is it really helpful to have a different term? And like one could argue it actually does, because it's affirming to the person to not have mother, right, a mother, a father, or whatever. But if the reading of it in situations that are embedded in power, and all situations are embedded with power, is still going to be based on whatever pre-existing scripts there are, is it actually helpful?
And I mean, this could be out of very different from, but I think in things when moments like these, it's important for us to recognize that when we're talking about discussions like these, again, we're going back to how structures are affecting this person's perceptions, and how the focus should shift from what these structures. For example, what I used as a metaphor or whatever it was is you as a queer person had watched Bended with Beckham, right? And you had taken as the example of, there's some queer tension over there. But let's say somebody who identifies.
Although I didn't call it queer tension even then.
Right.
Even though I called it, I mean, I saw it with somebody that I was in a relationship with, I didn't think of it as queer then. I just knew there was tension. It was palpable without words.
Right.
Yeah.
But somebody who, straight woman who's mask presenting, might see herself in the potential of, oh, I don't need to be feminine presenting to be loved by a man. At least in that one specific.
Oh yeah, when she says, why don't, yeah. Which is almost feminist in an active way, given that sports is feminist.
Having that focus on people and how they, again, this might sound very childish or whatever, but like having that focus towards the people and how they react, instead of like focusing on what
Is present.
is structuring around, is, I think, again, what goes back to utopia and like ambiguity, going back to the focus on people themselves, smaller kind of.
Yeah, like local reorganization of the meaning
Right,
of the law rather than the law given down itself.
Yes.
But actually, it's not childish, first of all. Like, we don't need to limit our comments by saying this might not be articulate, this might be childish. No, like, this is a really useful intervention, because the thing that you suggest, right, which is that, presenting based on who is at, not based on what the movie is about, but based on what the person reads it as, like the audience reading of the movie rather than the movie itself, is helpful precisely because the director has gone on record saying it's not a queer film. Right? And has said, oh, like, I'm sure there are people that read it as queer, and I'm glad it did well in the queer community, which again involves capitalism and like what sells. Right? It's like when Dostana was ambiguous for the purposes of like late capitalism, but it was a joke, but it also socialized people into thinking about queerness differently. And humor is another, like humor and law is another like really interesting way to think about this, right? Like how much work and harm does humor do? And I think there's, in your comment is the suggestion that precisely because the director has gone on record saying this is not a gay, and multiple people have asked, right? Like, is this a gay thing? And the director said, no, I didn't know that. And there's a new version of the movie coming, right? And 25 years of like conversation later, there are, because of the audience responses, when the director now talks about it, right, there's this like representation of like, oh, like I guess it is a queer reading, right? So the narrative changes not because, so there's like articles about how she talks about it in the 90s and how she talks about it now. And the capital logic of it can't be lost either. Like they could get funding for that without the only person that was a known actor in that thing. This is before Keira Knightley was like fancy, right? Like this was her first movie. So the coach was the only actor that had any screen presence. So they were trying to get funding for an indie project. And they did what they needed to do to sell the movie. So none of this is intentional. So it connects to the accidental feminism logic of like, none of this was intentional. They were not trying to make a queer movie. They just happened to make a movie. A bunch of people read queerness into it, right? But they didn't read queerness into it actively. They read into it passively. And the question is, how can that be utopic? Is it utopic? Like if it's not read actively? If you don't think about it, but you only have memory of it, is it utopic? Yeah.
I feel it is utopic because the whole point of being, the text that was given to us. So what I interpreted of it was that even if you put an aesthetic into a film and if it is being read as queer,
like The Merchant of Venice by Shakespeare. A lot of people say that Antonio and Bassanio were I mean
100%.
no
one doesn't read it.
So even when we as students were reading that text, some of the people pointed it out and asked our English literature teacher that is this the case? And she just asked us that, did you read it? And we were like, well, no, we didn't read it from anywhere. It's just kind of pretty evident. So now that I've read this text, I can relate it back to that and say that because when authors, they put these kind of nuances into text where you can read in between lines and say that, this is something that, represents a queer community is where, utopia can be found.
So there's something that people put in that is open enough, to go back to your point on ambiguity as possibility, that is open enough to be read differently, then that can be helpful. And I guess, bless you, it's interesting that when you read the text, you thought it was obviously queer. I can assure you that when I read the text, right, like 30 years ago, if I had read it in high school, I'd have been the only person who thought there was something different about it, right? Or not me, or like me and two other people. So there's something about also the queer movement and its consciousness into how many people read queerness into text now that didn't exist before, which makes it not an odd reading, but a possible reading. And I think that's the time when ambiguity matters, right? When you really want rights and someone gives you ambiguity, that's not helpful. It's only helpful when it's an impossible circumstance and actually limiting rights would hurt the movement in the long run. So you're right in that. I mean, in this case, I don't think the director had an intent of putting those spaces, right? Although she has gone on record saying she got Beckham because he was really popular with gay men. So it's like there's a past, and that's the funny thing. I mean, as I say in the piece, I don't even remember that coming out scene, right? Like that coming out scene was so central to that movie. Now that I reread it. But as a child, like I didn't remember, or as a young person, I didn't remember that scene as relevant. Like that wasn't as big. I just remembered the tension that was palpable throughout this scene, which is also sort of interesting in terms of like queer precedent and possibility.
I just have a question. I'm going to be very honest. I have not watched the movie. Okay, so this is fully just me asking a question about the movie. But like, I know we talk about the main character being like, oh, she had attention, then she went into a straight relationship. That doesn't erase her still being queer, right?
No,
Being queer, we don't know.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. And I think that's the reading. The reading is that this person has queer tension that almost gets, and it is a queer story in the end, because at the end of it, she leaves with her friend to go learn soccer in America. So it's like it's a queer tension, even if it's not explored. And like part of it is that even on straight scripts, it is a queer tension. Okay, there's an entire. Did you have your hand up? No. Okay. Yeah, this group. Yeah.
A small experience thing. I'm not sure how this fits in. So this is more than 12 years ago now, sir.
Yeah.
Walking on 2.8, and there's two.
It is 2.8.
The road from here to
highway. Used to calling it. So there's two teenagers, let's say, boys who are locals, walking, holding hands. Very commonplace,
Absolutely.
natural occurrence
In South Asia and Middle East, yes.
Now you have a classmate of yours who's from the north, or from whatever background she's from, whatever, and she's like, "Oh, those people." And I'm like, "What those people?" So reading queerness into
That's the opposite of this. Like, should we read queerness into text where queerness was not necessary or imagined?
it was not disparaging my classmates. You was not in any way negative. It was of discovery of look. Even locals, it's called
Even locals are gay.
and I was and I'm just standing there. Am I going to like? I said no. That's not that. It's just normal. Like everyone does it, and then like no, you're being homophobic. I'm like, no, that's quite funny.
But you homophobic in the middle of this. Although can I just so there's something about how, to me, that's queerness in plain sight. I don't think think of queerness as sexual choice. I think of queerness as alterity and like proximity and possibility.
But in this case, it is the norm, right?
But male intimacy is not always the norm, right? Like
Then they're just holding hands and walking, at least.
but that's intimacy. That's like sweetness. That's like this.
But it's also very normal.
And that's utopic to me that it's normal because like physical affection in public spaces is not normal. So there's something really utopic about the fact that when were we talking? Oh, we were talking about genderqueer hostels, right? Like, and who rushes to use genderqueer hostels, right? And what does it mean to like use these hostels? And what?
Nothing.
Like, what?
My face.
But you're right. Like, there's an assumption of like, if queerness is the norm, to me that is utopic. If it's not an issue that two men hold hands, that's actually utopic. Like that actually means it's so commonplace that we don't have to name it. Right? Because there is a chance that those people might have been queer. You don't know that. Like there's like not, but that in itself is not gay. I think that's the difference. It's not you can't assume sexual intent, but you can see intimacy. And I use intimacy completely asexually.
In my view of the world, of what I had seen at the age of 17, Karimnagar, Hyderabad, for me, that was so common.
But that's so utopic. How lovely is it that you grew up watching men holding hands?
Good thing, no.
Utopia acha hai, yaar. Like why are you resisting? Like, why are you resisting utopia? This is excellent.
There are occasional pockets of joy. Let us savor them.
And I actually think that is utopia. Can I just like to put a pin on it? Occasional pockets of joy is utopia. It doesn't have to be an everyday thing. So, you know, Davina Cooper has this amazing book on like what it means to have everyday utopias, right? Highly recommended reading, right? And inherent to it is Davina Cooper, DAVINA COOPER. Right? And she writes about prefiguration and utopic legality. And it's just a really helpful thought space for thinking about this. And inherent in her argument is like, utopia, if you wait for it to be law, is never going to happen, right? Like, it's going to be a pink, like, I don't know, like there was a knitting circle, somebody who used her theory in Wales, like sort of showed how people threw dolls made out of pink yarn, right, everywhere as a way to do protest, right? But that would also bring delight, right? And I think of that image all the time. Like, what does it mean to do protest that also brings delight? That is actually an everyday utopia that we can access or be gentle with or happy with. Yeah.
Sir, recently we watched one movie like Triple R.
Where that I didn't watch.
They're not, but when you watch,
Oh, that song.
The entire.
the whole movie,
That's the only one I know. Wait, the whole movie is queer.
they say it's friendship, but it's
But friendship can be queer. Like that's the point, right? Like we can. Are they the main?
What people say about Sholay also.
Sholay was definitely. That wasn't queer. Like that was not queer. Like that was gay. So RRR was like the protagonist for two men.
When I was watching, I was like, this is not just male friendship.
But even if it is male friendship, right? Like I'm saying, even if it's male friendship and that's why they are holding hands, that can be utopic. Accept it. We can reimagine the world as utopic. Imagine just walking down 2.8 and getting some delight. Nice nudges. Instead of like, what is this 2.8 only? No, 2.8. You're laughing in a way that I got the fact wrong again. Such unnecessary.
You are so worried of being judged.
I am so worried. I'm so nervous that I'm going to like not be judged by Kranti. This is my real deep anxiety.
This is power.
Everyone should read Dave's book.
Yeah.
Precisely for this reason.
Yeah.
Because their entire researches on ethnographic researches on how lesbians before
Before the movement.
before the legality of it came into question. Saw how
And we have a new book that's also coming out on like how trans movements did this differently. Yeah.
So how they used to write letters to each other and they would fight each other at parlors and they would post letters to a magazine that would then send it and then publish those later.
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful book if anyone is interested in looking at all of this in more detail. And similarly, their argument that this possibility and this ambiguity used to exist before we went to the courts as a queer movement.
And it exists now.
It exists now, yes, but a lot of possibilities got shut down
Yeah.
because of
Yeah.
how we went to court. Because earlier, two men holding hands, living together, it was known as Sakhi and Dosti.
Yeah.
But now, because it is so into the limelight of being categorized as gayness or lesbians or like queerness even, LGBT,
Mm.
So much harder to access.
exactly, it has those spaces have become harder to access because you're always under
Completely agree.
suspicion
Yeah.
of being
There's
something.
surveil. There's distrust.
Yes, there is distrust.
Distrust is going to be the next book, Sam. Tell you.
So
Yeah.
that is what is going on in my
Yeah, no, you're totally right. You're totally right. And it's also helping me think about where the law is. Right? Like where is the law? The law is in that the minute the blase becomes obvious, you lose the subtlety, good and bad. Right? Like that is capable and possible. And I don't know, I worry with that a little bit because then you know it's going to get co-opted to not have any progress. Just be like, you want ambiguous spaces? Lay low. Like I will give you ambiguous spaces. Right? But you're right. There's a way in which I think that book also does an excellent job of reminding us that movements existed even before they looked like movements, right? So people fighting for rights or possibility or imagined utopias were doing it in such a small scale that this was available to them without it being such a huge thing. The other person who writes about this is Srila Roy, about trans activism in Calcutta. And I think there's a new wave of authors who are writing about queer possibility in South Asia that I'm happy to like share, note, record. Hanji?
Maya Sharma.
Oh yeah. There's like just an entire wave of such imagined possibility within the law, within like social capacities, precisely based on the fact that these rules or categories are not going to save us. Yeah.
There's a really lovely Kannada web series, Kannada English web series
Ooh.
on finding lesbian flirtation. Actually, I think to begin with, pre access to technology, internet. And have you seen?
No, I haven't, but you're just making me think of a short film that everybody should watch. Actually, watch it before class tomorrow. The Kannada series.
Kannada series name, I don't remember, but I sent link.
Yeah, send the link. Can you also just send the link to a short movie called Sunday? It's on YouTube. It's a 9-minute watch. I cannot recommend it enough. It is one of the most delightful. Have you watched it? It is one of the. Has anyone watched it? It is one of the most delightful queer micro movies I have watched. And I want you to think about whether it's heartbreaking or beautiful when you come to it, and what utopia means. Actually, yeah, that would be a fun thing to read. Just watch along with it. Yes.
Also, Ruth Vanita's book.
Yeah, Ruth Vanita's book. That's what we were talking. Yeah, but I think that's the thing. The love's rights is such a helpful context for what it means to have civil contracts. It's like, what do we do with contracts? Because they've always existed. It's not new. It's not new to the way in which we're thinking about this. Sorry, Shivani, I know you had.
So it's something that came as a reaction. Like I visited the Kamra archive.
Yes.
And
Oh, yeah.
They have like the proceeding of Ruth Vanita's
Yeah.
wedding.
Yeah.
That reading that was so utopic for me.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Like the way the whole program.
That's right. And one of the other weddings that's in that as well, happened in Maryland that like Ruth Vanita was like part of. They have like the proceedings of that too in the Kamra archive.
And, here you've mentioned about like their love interest with the coach, and you mentioned that it is unnatural to it later unnaturally makes their love interest. Was it intentional?
It was to say, why do we think that like isn't it unnatural to think of straightness in this capacity? Right? That word gets used all the time in queerness. And how do we rethink? Thank you for that close reading. I appreciate it.
And also the part where you discuss about Jules' mother calls them lesbian, and the aunt is like, "Oh, ye kaun sa
Sunshine there. Yeah, who said sunshine? You said sunshine.
yeah." So yeah, and then I was.
But that's a helpful way to think about humor. It's an excellent way to consider humor as possibility. It's like in that minute it gets, in the second it becomes like, oh, they're going to out someone.
Yeah.
You're like, actually no, like let's have humor, right? Like, and I think so another piece I juxtaposed this with a show called Sort Of. How many people have watched Sort Of? Just this Pakistani American queer show about a non-binary person that's going through their trans journey, but is very non-vocal about their trans. It's one of the best shows I have watched. Like, it is so good.
Where you watch?
Yeah, you watch what?
As in, on what is it available?
My TV. Oh! I thought you were like judging me for not having a TV. I just bought it. It's not my own problem. Sorry. I didn't have a TV till earlier this year, and so people have always judged me for watching stuff on my computer. So I thought you were judging me. So that's what I thought it was. I don't know. Netflix. It's on Netflix? Okay, great.
Thank you. My TV.
Or sort of. Yeah. So, and I juxtapose it to be like, right now, if you had an ambiguous story, that would be queer violence, right? Because then you're like, come on, like, don't do that now. Don't queer bait us and don't give us these outcomes right now. But in places where it's not available, I actually think it can be a possibility. Because there's a lot of people who come to this movie now and rage on it for being queer bait.
But as a point here, I do not like stuff that is so on the nose about queerness.
Right.
I don't relate to it.
That's what I mean. Like, so that assumes that all queers want to do, right? So I've been trying to work through the concept of queer shame, right? Not as a bad thing, but as a thing to actually, how do we queer shame? Like, literally, how do you queer the word shame? Like, you queer the word pride, and like, pride is assumed to be something that can be queered, but like for a lot of communities for whom pride is not a positive association, pride actually might not resonate in the same way, right? Like, and so, and to the extent we think of silence or like shame is actually something that's like imposed on you, but it might be not the association you have with it at all. Like, shame might not be how you, like, queer silence might actually be a positive thing, right? Like, we assume that all queer silence is shame, but like silence might also be expansive, right? Like, and give you possibility that doesn't exist otherwise. Yeah. Yeah.
So sorry, just building on what you just said. There was this one YouTuber, I don't remember the video, I don't remember when I watched it, but I was also not out at the time to my family. And it was just like, this person was justifying why they didn't go to Pride. Like, Pride is just for all the people who are extroverts. And like,
Pride is also for capitalists.
Yes, I know, but like, this is also just like, I'm just a quiet queer. I just don't want to. I don't want to go out and like show it out. I just want to be in my house and like I don't want to have to just like.
This is Hannah Gadsby.
I could be.
Hannah Gadsby does have a stand up about.
Yeah.
Yes, Hannah Gadsby also has this point, but this specific thing was a YouTube video, and it's just like, yeah, why is Pride such like a like going to Pride and like being at Pride is such like a big thing that also is not accessible to a lot of people. And
there are other pride adjacent things that happen without being called pride, right? Like that,
exactly.
like, there's this great ethnography of bars in Coimbatore of like what it means to find and like actually do. Speaking of cruising, like cruising utopia, like literally it is cruising utopia in a sense where you can exist on your own terms without having to perform a global logic of pride or identity. This is why, to me, this is the limits of identity, right? Like, I think it helps you to a point, and after a point, it actually doesn't help you because it assumes that everybody wants to access identity on the same terms.
Yes, and then it also, in a lot of queer spaces, it also assumes an identity. So, this one queer party I went to, this one person
The queer grandmother?
Huh?
Oh, okay. Sorry.
No, I get you.
I just had a conversation about a queer grandmother that was casteist but queer friendly. So, like, that tracks. I was like, that sounds right.
Yeah, so this one person person had short hair in that party. And then it was all just like, and then everyone's just like, oh, you're a fake mask, you're a fake mask. I don't know. I came late to the party. I don't know why this happened. And then later the person just like, I don't identify as mask. I don't know why this is a thing. So it's also, even in queer spaces.
Reading queerness is in the.
Yeah, you also, like you see someone's hairstyle, you see someone's clothes, and you assume an identity for
Which
them.
goes to your point about like.
Goes back to that point. And then the other thing I also want to raise is you can create queerness in children's films also. Your footnote about Disney films is one thing.
Yeah.
I'm talking about a more recent example. There is this movie called K-pop Demon Hunters on
The
Netflix.
best queer film made. 100%.
Yeah, 100%. But it's letting people theorize what
I
poly.
might not know Hinge, but I know K-pop demon. You think archive of
You
possible.
might, but other people don't. So anyway, but it's just like having some sort of
Socialization for children, yeah.
Poly queer relationships are so rare to find, even like without
Totally.
definition. Poly queer relationships are just hard to find on cinema. So this was like a very nice piece of work of just being like, oh yeah, they could be poly. We don't know.
Yeah. And so nice that we don't know.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because in those spaces of not knowing, it allows the audience to decide what works for them.
Yeah.
Which is something that a lot of shows, especially
In late identity capitalism, don't do.
yes, but also
The new literalism.
they also use this tool of, okay, I'm not going to give a definition, so that you can theorize the ending that you want in either way.
Yeah.
This reminds me of Utopia too, where they refuse to acknowledge the canon between a rabbit and a fox, and they keep pushing romantic propaganda, but never outright saying
Yeah.
Disney and
Oh,
Yeah.
Professor, this is with regards to some, as I was reading Passage to North and looking at a documentary about the LTTE and how two women in the documentary were close and their partnership. It's not purely defined as a comparator.
No, yeah.
It is a comparator, but the difference of the what's relation is there ambiguity about how in the radical movement,
Tradition,
how
yeah.
their partnership or their friendship has been. So I mean, I think as an accidental feminism again, maybe we have more scope looking into some banned organizations or radical politics that happen in India also, which may have more representation than any other political parties that
Totally.
are recognized or going to the parliamentary elections. And then
Yeah.
when Arundhati Roy also rise and all, there is some scope of looking into how the queerness works in this. I mean, though
I
they're
love that. Yeah.
outsidely, I mean, again, if you see from Alpha.
Again, they might not want these words, right?
Yeah.
Like they, yeah.
Describe these moments as very gendered, but within the gender rank and file, the
Yeah, I just met someone that's working on the Indian Army and gender representation in it, like a PhD student that's working on it. And I remember thinking, like, why do we care about gender? I mean, not why do we care? Like, I feel the same way about my book too. I'm like, why do we care about law firms, right? Like, but then it's like a helpful way to think about where gender pops up. And I think radical movements are a really good example of like where, again, to be the limits of identity too, right? Because you can look at that archive and read it as queer, but if the archive does not want to be read as queer, right? Like, then what is the purpose of reading it as queer? And I struggle with that. Like, I struggle with these readings that are not or public, but or semi-public, that we are reading queerness into that might not actually purport to be queer on its own terms. And I don't know the answer, but I think that's a researcher's ethical struggle when they look at these archives. Yeah. Sorry.
yeah,
Both of them.
something connected in some ways. When I was reading this cruising Utopia
Yeah.
thing, and particularly the term cruising, I got to know about it like through reading about it, or like once I was in a park and there was like a gay man who's like older, like we were in a group, and he was telling that how like we used to walk here and this, and then then I realized, oh, this is cruising, and at that time also I felt that I never had access to something like this in some ways, that
like being assigned female at birth and all. Even though like for them it was so bittersweet because of all
Yeah, because of the amount of threat. Yeah.
But even from that and while reading the Feeling Utopia reading, somewhere I felt that even in the context where cruising is used here, I feel that for for that you need access to certain ideas and perspective. Uh, for example, when I saw Bendit like Beckham when I was younger, like I did not have a queer reading to it. Even later, when like first watch, I did not even know what the term lesbian is. So that in the second one, only in the end when her mother called her that you're lesbian with my daughter, is that I then reflected that oh why her mother
Was thinking that was the case. Yeah, yeah,
an
yeah.
issue. So this was my reflection of like through this perspective, I feel that the access to utopia is coming through certain privilege of having
that's a
this
good reading. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
autonomy of cruising in the sense how this
Yeah.
reading is using it because it reflects on the idea of queerness from a perspective where people understand the queer concept of queerness in this way.
And also cruising, the word, just the word, is a word of leisure,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Like which has in feminist literature always been used to consider ease and privilege a little bit, right? Like, and I don't think the cruising word is used in that, I mean, because it's written, it's spoken at a time when like there is criminalized homosexuality. So it's not a privilege to be gay at all in these times. But cruising, I think, like complicates that term a little bit because it means you have ease of movement, spaces where you know that you can lock in, right? So another project that I'm working on is the call centers in the 70s and the 80s of like queer helplines. And so when people call in, so I have the call logs of everybody that's called into these centers and what it means for them to call in and say, I don't know, I think I'm trans, I like wearing this, that. They're trying to like speak through it. And then the person says, oh, you should go to this place, this is a good cruising center, right? Like, so to go back to that thing of it's not just elitist, it's also knowledge. It's like having a panic, not knowing where to call, but also epistemologically not knowing what the name is of the thing that you're nervous about. And if you don't know what it is you're feeling, then it's without the word, then it's harder to come into it later, right? Like there's, yeah. Yeah, last 2 points and then we end. This is very sad.
I'm not sure if I'm even going to say something wrong.
Oh my God, you have to stop apologizing. Just
No,
say
it's
the thing.
So it's something like my grandfather is 90 years old right now. I live with my grandparents. When you talk about these things, it's like, of course they've always existed. Of course. This 90-year-old person is stating that there were always spaces for them, and we always knew.
We always knew that they were on.
Odd is a very good word.
What is a great word? Teda.
Different.
That was my childhood nickname. And they didn't know this. Like my parents, I'm called Teddy. It comes from Teda, and like they were just like, oh yeah.
No, it's
That's like how right you were.
obviously
Did it make you?
No, and my dad had this serious problem, and I answered him with, "What do you mean? What about rights and whatever?" But from his perspective, it's like, what happens in the bedroom happens in the bedroom for everybody. Why does anybody have to hold hands in public?
Yeah.
What is the problem that girl and boy want to do anything in public? Stop judging. Go to your own spaces.
I love it. So it's a privacy argument at the corest sense.
What is this?
Just a property argument also in the chorus.
Right. It's what I wrote for Danda's course. Like that was the literal argument I wrote for my first class. That was the first paper I wrote. It's like, what is the privacy argument for like queerness? Yeah. I don't think I'd make that dissertation. Yeah, yeah. I don't know if I would make it now, but that's totally the argument that was started. Okay, last word, Professor.
I was reading your accidental feminism and the Brendan piece and the Utopia learning together. And there's a part in your accidental feminism where you talk about happenstance, alienation, right?
considering that now that I am in a bigger city where I have access to meeting people who are non-binary, and even if they are like different, they're coming in all spectrums, coming from different smaller tier 2, tier 3 cities. One thing that is kind of coming by talking to people is that
I'm gonna take a picture. Stay for 1 minute.
some common themes, right? That okay, if you were from a tier 3 city, common experiences that okay, we were that this person happens to be a second daughter. So maybe it was that they were socialized as a boy, or the fact that if they are from a city like Rohtak, they played there's possibility of sports, right? Different kind of things. And the parents might not really have the words to kind of describe, okay, the child is non-binary, your child is trans, or whatever. But it's very easily like something that I'm kind of drawing into it, that they found, like even in that silence that you're saying, the silence, they found an expansive way in which they could
Reframe themselves.
gender while playing that sport, or by being, I don't know, like a makeshift son, because there was again, like from where I come from, like having 2 daughters is something that okay, you don't have a son if you're coming from a kind of a peasant caste background, right? And because land holding is kind of determined by sons, and like you need to have a son to kind of pass it down, like lineage wala thing. So interestingly, while I was having that conversation with my father, it was on this thing that okay, we don't want you to get married. Obviously, we're not going to force you to get married, but what we want is that have a sathi, right? And we're like, sathi can come. And obviously, there was like an emotional conversation.
Because they don't want their children alone. Yeah.
So, and again, I found that like I have had that conversation with Anandita as well, that my parents don't know English. That is, there is.
So this is not the language in which they are relating.
They don't know what I work on.
Yeah.
They have no ways of knowing.
But they can be your allies in other ways that are so central. It's like the friend who says you're a little bit outside girl.
Little bit outside woman.
I feel like little bit outside woman is a great way to end a class on queerness. This has been a delight. Thank you all for sharing, and thank you all for being like such a generous, generative audience.